Till 1985, it wasn't a federal crime to hire someone to kill somebody in another state. And we took the victim, who was his partner, who couldn't believe it until he hears and sees the video. We send him to Vegas for a week to get lost. And then they take this guy out into the desert, bloody him up, take some Polaroids. They take him to the subjects. They go crazy. My name is Hugo Rodriguez, born and grew up in Miami, Florida. When I was 17, I would have been subjected to the first draft into the military because we were in the midst of Vietnam. Fortunate for me, I was 17. So as fate would have it, I was hired by the FBI. At that time, what the FBI would do is it would hire several thousand young men and women from everywhere in America. I mean, you're getting kids from Spokane, you're getting them from Dakota, you're getting them from Florida, from Texas, and anywhere, with this facade that you're going to come to work for the FBI. And, so I went, I was a gopher. They call them support employees, a clerk there. And that helped me avoid moving or doing whatever I was going to do. So I beat the draft in that regard. I worked my way up. There were some interesting things that happened. Along the way, I got a BA, and then I was appointed the youngest FBI agent ever. I didn't know what to expect because when you're 17 years old, you don't have the media. You had 3 channels, but it was mystique. You had on Sunday evening after the Ed Sullivan Show, you watched the FBI. And it was a mystique, and nobody from the hood, people that I grew up with or whatever, could even think of it. So I was fortunate, and I was just glad, and I was impressed by everyone there. And those 5 years indicated all of that. I mean, my third day on the job was this infamous Barbara Mackel kidnapping where the young lady was buried in a pine box for 84 hours. And I just saw all these men gather together and just work and sleep on cots and all that stuff. And I just said to myself, I want a part of this. And then I became the FBI's youngest FBI agent on my 23rd birthday, which is the earliest that you can enter on duty. There was this big, huge publicity campaign for me being the youngest FBI agent, and, the media, and I did the talk shows and all that business. Now, you have to understand, this was 1973, so J. Edgar Hoover died in 72, so they just started doing the right thing, I would say. Unfortunately, no one was as tanned as I was in the agency. We go to the academy, and my class was either 25 or 30 people, and there were 5 blacks, 5 male blacks, 4 Hispanics, and 2 women. The rest were Anglo men. I'm getting on the bus, and I was the last one. I hear this guy saying there were 3 executives. They said, this is what we've become, spicks, spooks, and broads. And I'm telling you, I realize now, many years later, it just resonated and just locked itself into my head. And then we went from there, and I accomplished a lot of things, and I think things that other FBI agents wouldn't do, but it was systemic at that time. I was sent to Albuquerque, New Mexico as my first office. It was like taking a city boy and putting him in the desert, But it was a very interesting time. I handled some crazy things, including going to 98 autopsies because we were responsible for crimes on the Indian reservations. Did that for a year and was transferred to New York City. Started and completed law school while I was working in New York across the river at Seton Hall Law. Finished up my assignment there, was transferred back to Albuquerque, New Mexico as the chief counsel for the office. And I did that for 6 or 7 years. A lot of dynamics going on in the FBI at that time. And even though I had been in 19 years, my bald spot is because my head kept hitting the glass ceiling. And I said, the heck with it. And I was fortunate to land on my feet, went to work for the governor of the state. And then my mentor in the FBI, very good friend, had had enough of the bigotry and discrimination that existed in the FBI. And at that time, very few or non-existent women, very few non-existent African Americans. Latinos, even less. So anyway, my mentor, he had risen to the highest rank of any Hispanic in the FBI, and he was a big boss, more than a capo, I would say. Anyway, he had gotten up to the top of the agency, and they cut his legs out from underneath him and a lot of other things. And he wanted to sue the FBI, and I tried to talk him out of it. He finally does, and within 2 weeks, those lawyers dump him because they were just intimidated, and it was too overwhelming, and they didn't want their tax returns scrutinized every year, and there was no lawyers at all, no law firms that would just even look at the case or touch it. I said, hey, I went to law school. Let's go for it. And we did. and it was a nationwide class action against the Department of Justice, but the FBI for systemic discrimination. At that time, plaintiffs were not entitled to a jury, nor were they entitled to pecuniary compensation, but they got other things. So this was before a federal judge in El Paso, Texas. He certified the class of all Hispanic FBI agents against the FBI, and it was a long, protracted trial. A lot of things affected all our lives. Nobody thought of it. It was impossible. There were 22 lawyers on one side, 2 of us on this side, and we won. And at that time, it was big. The class plaintiff, Matt, went on to bigger and better things. The class members got hearings for rightful place seniorities and transfers and stuff. We were very lucky. We were tremendously lucky because we were sabotaged left and right. But it really comes down to an analysis, a statistical analysis for what's called disparate impact, which doesn't require intent. It just says an analysis of the numbers. There are so many male supervisors with X amount of experience and training, and there's X amount of females with equal. Then you look at the positions and who got them and whatever. That's the statistical analysis. And that's where we prevailed because it was obvious by the numbers. Now, getting to the numbers is a whole different story because they threw up every roadblock that could exist, but we got over it. We got over it with some, as I said back then, I used every dirty trick they taught me against them. And it worked. I think Perez versus Department of Justice was probably the biggest thing that I've ever done. At that time, the pundits were saying, hey, Perez versus the FBI is similar to Brown versus Board of Education. And it was at that level. I mean, I think the bigger thing was the arsenal that they threw against these poor guys. There were 22 lawyers on every day on that side and 2 of us on this side. We had no money. We had no resources. It was impossible. It was the ultimate David and Goliath moment. Prior, I had never been in a trial before. And you want to exacerbate it. It's a trial before a judge, which is, we were going to lose. We were going to lose. Good old Southern boy in Texas, we were going to lose. But guess what? Most honorable and respectful guy I know. He called it the way it was. And I was living in Albuquerque, but this was in El Paso. And finally, after being away 20 years, moved back to Miami. Became a criminal defense lawyer. There were some other machinations that happened during that case to the point where we filed retaliation. And let me just cut to the chase. As a result, even though I wasn't a class member, I was a lawyer, the court awarded me a full pension of an FBI executive, which I will receive for the rest of my life, which I'm happy about. After that happened, I opened my own law firm, just strictly federal criminal defense and federal stuff for most employees and people that had issues and stuff, and most of it around the country. I'd like to believe things have changed, and I know it's much more diverse, but I'm still told, well, let me put it this way. After that, we brought this action against the FBI on behalf of all Hispanics. We won. 5 years later, the FBI settled with all Black agents. Last year, female recruits at the academy in a class were awarded either $22 million or $25 million. Last year. It doesn't change. The people are great, the majority of them. I was fortunate to do things others didn't get to do, but it just got to be a point where, hey, it's not right. It's not right. And I wasn't willing to just continue through it. And probably was the most drastic thing I ever did in my life. If I would have known then what I know now, I probably wouldn't have done it. At this time, the FBI didn't investigate drugs, okay? They do now. And unfortunately, a DEA agent, Kiki Camarena, was kidnapped and brutally tortured and killed by Mexican cartel gangs. For whatever reason, DEA said, hey, we're getting out of mud. Mexican heroin, Lodo in Spanish. Cut to the chase. I get a call from Washington. We need you in an undercover capacity. You're suave Miami lawyer. We're going to be in a Lear jet. You're going to front $5 million. And they say, the agent says we're setting up to buy heroin. Okay? It's a facade. It didn't go as they said, but it was very, very successful. We do the thing. It works. I'm beat. I just flop on the bed. One of my buddies, you got to come down. You got to come down. Everybody's celebrating. I finally got dressed. I go down and, hey, everybody's congratulating him. And I hear a voice. Somebody say, who's Hugo? And I look over and I see a man that doesn't look familiar. And he has this odd shape in his head. And I'm ready to reach for my gun. And then the guy just gives me the strongest man brace I've ever had in my life. Whoa, okay, fine. Separate. What the hell is this? Oh, you don't know who this is? Yeah. Well, he was the last DEA agent to make a hand-to-hand buy of heroin. And when he went to do it, the guy pulled out a 9mm, shot him right in the head. It went out the back of his head. Hence, he's got a plea, a little like Humpty Dumpty type thing. And he says, oh, that's why we're working this heroin case. And I remember going back to the room and just almost passing out. I just couldn't. It just sort of said to me, wait, I know we buy on to dangerousness and whatever and all that. I didn't buy making whatever I was making back then into situations like this. It's just not what I bought into. But the thing at that time that was really, really resonating in me was all these things that I was hearing from other agents, because I was one of the few lawyers, about what was going on with them and what they were being subjected to. And one of my themes always was for monolingual agents who couldn't be bilingual. Hey, I can do your job, but you can't do mine. I don't need to accompany you to interview somebody and take notes for you. And that's really what it was at that time. And it wasn't that. I just said to myself, hey, only the Latin guys would have been subjected to this. It isn't going to be me. And then I think that's what started the Rolling Rock from there. There's the state system. And most of those cases are your murders, your armed robberies, your sexual assaults, those types of things. Federal, among the FBI, are the federal crimes: bank robbery, extortion, money laundering. Now they're working drugs. And so it's a different environment, okay? I would say that 95% of the time when the FBI is reacting to something, it's pre-planned. Whereas unfortunately, a police officer who pulls somebody over on the side of the road is going to be by themselves and has no clue what's going to happen. I think that's probably the easiest distinction that I can make. There's many others. I mean, it's very important on both sides. But I think that the crimes that are investigated are totally different, and that dictates who they are and what they are. I represented a foreign national that had a product that was in demand throughout the world. And he developed this product on his farm. Are you with me so far? Okay. And a lot of other things we could talk about, but it grew to the point where he had a personal army of 7,000 people. And it was big time. And of course, like every major dealer in Colombia, the Colombians will allow the United States to come in and just kidnap them and bring them here. And then they're thrown in prison and they work deals, they do whatever. But that's basically the system that exists. And of course, that happened to him and he was sentenced. But now he's back in Colombia. But I don't know, but I think he may have been back in jail in Colombia, but I haven't kept up with it. But it was just a very different dynamic. It was very little courtroom work. It was really investigation and trying to put him in the best position possible. You have to remember that, I don't know if I'm correct with this statistic, I think 95%, 97% of everyone accused of a federal crime pleads guilty. Very few go to trial. Those that go to trial, if they're convicted because of this antiquated sentencing guideline, are just, sent away. So that is a real motivation for people to plead guilty and cooperate. We've created a system of rats that everybody cooperates against everybody else for their own self-benefit. And it's just gotten to be an accepted method. Everybody. There's nobody that doesn't cooperate. All that crap on TV, snitches get maybe, but everybody cooperates. From the whale all the way down to the guppy. The guppy can't eat up, but the whale can eat down. And that's what happens in the federal system. Until 1985, it wasn't a federal crime to hire someone to kill somebody in another state. It was murder. Let's say New York, New Jersey. It was murder in New York, but if you conspired over the phone or whatever to have somebody travel interstate, it wasn't a crime. So yeah, and they have an undercover unit at FBI, and a scenario came up and they called me, can you pull it off? I said, bring it. And the first one was a couple that owned a store that was similar to a Radio Shack back then, electronics, and they had a partner, and they wanted to do away with the partner, and they talked to some people who talked to some people, and some people said, yeah, I know the Spanish guy in Miami, man, he'll do it. He's real professional, but it's going to cost you. So being the skier I am, I said, and they were in northern New Mexico, I'll meet them in Durango, Colorado. I want the FBI to send me to Durango, Colorado, so I can go skiing for a couple of days. And we did, and it was recorded audio and video, and the guy brought us the cash. We counted it. He counted it. What do you want us to do? And, I don't effing care. I don't care if you put a bullet in his head. I don't care if you take a shotgun and shove it all. I don't care. So what we ended up doing is he wanted to file insurance. So we had the FBI makeup artist from LA come out, who was employed, and we took the victim, who was his partner, who couldn't believe it until he hears and sees the video. We send him to Vegas for a week to get lost. And then they take this guy out into the desert, bloody him up, take some Polaroids. They take them to the subjects. They go crazy. We have him fill out the forms, and there you go. And after he was arrested, he was brought in shackles, and they're going to hold him. I had come into the courtroom, dressed, and sat in the back. They call the case, and the government call your first witness. I called Hugo Rodriguez. I had a completely different undercover name. And the role there was a Scarface, Tony Montana, Yo te lo hago, man, all that stuff. So when I'm walking up, he's got his back to me and his lawyer, and I put my hand on his shoulder. Greg, I hope it goes good for you today. And he just started screaming and yelling. Anyway, he pled guilty. That was the first. And then we did one with a guy who was in jail, who wanted a government witness taken out. And we met with his people. They gave us the money. They got arrested. He got rearrested. He tried to kill a federal probation officer. It was a played out type of situation where we wanted them. And nowadays, forget that. Nowadays, you can go on websites where people can solicit somebody to take out their partner or whatever. 95% of those are cops on the other side, but people are crazy. People are crazy,